It's either this or it's that. Or is it? First one of these I did was a response to the song by The Strokes called Call It Fate, Call It Karma, and my opinion was an unpopular opinion. Once again, I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it either, and I was, honest about my impressions of it, and fans of that band that are, I've discovered are pretty loyal and diehard didn't appreciate my take. So, and that's cool.
And that's cool. That's cool.
I like dissent, and I wanted to give rise to conversation. I want to investigate music that maybe isn't so polarizing, or maybe look at something that doesn't have such a loyal cultish devotion, because my next idea after the Strokes video was that I was going to investigate the popular perception of Syd Barrett, and I decided that after the response to the Strokes video I wanted to table the Syd Barrett video and maybe move on to something less incendiary. I'm going to investigate in this video a pop song from late 1968 that reached its pinnacle on the chart in early 1969. And that song is Build Me Up Buttercup by the Foundations. This song's ubiquitous. I feel like everybody probably knows it. And I'm going to try to use direct samples from the song itself, but in the event that that causes a copyright strike, I'm going to sing them instead. Now, I'm not Colin Young, but I'm not trying to be. I just really want to convey the part of the song that I'm analyzing at any time. So hopefully that suffices in the event that the actual recording isn't available to me, because I'm not trying to, put up videos for someone else to monetize. I want eventually, if I could ever garner enough viewership to qualify, to monetize these videos for my own purposes. So, to start that song, it begins with a chorus, which is, I think a great tactic in music, that whole don't bore us, get to the chorus thing, and that if you have a chorus that is, an excellent hook of the song, why not lead with that? It's a great way to just reach out and grab your listener from the onset. Now, that's not the very first thing that happens in the song. It's got this simple piano, bass keys going with some bongo drums in the background, which is, cool and eclectic and I think fairly novel, especially at the time. But then they leap right into that bombastic chorus, and this is Colin Young's intro, essentially, to the band. He replaced the previous singer, and on this track, with him essentially debuting, this was their big hit. So I think that's telling of the power of Colin Young's voice and his delivery, his earnest delivery. But it's into that earnest delivery and the message of the song that I want to delve, because I think that the message in the song is really toxic. So, the chorus is, why do you build me up, Buttercup baby, just to let me down and mess me around, and then worst of all, you never call baby when you say you will, but I love you still, I need you more than anyone, darling, you know that I had from the start. So build me up, Buttercup, don't break my heart. And what I appreciate about that is the vulnerability. It's a guy being vulnerable in a way that I think that by and large men aren't really allowed to be vulnerable, or not encouraged to be vulnerable. And so on that note, I think that it has immense value in that whole, here's a guy bearing his heart to a woman, essentially pleading with her. It's don't take my affections lightly, I love you and I want you to love me back. But I think therein lies the rub. It's not just that he's saying, look, I really care about you, and I think there's a foundation. I didn't really mean for that to be a pun, but there's a foundation here for a healthy, reciprocal, loving relationship. But that's really not the case, and you get a sense of that not being the case as he expounds in the verses. And in a way, it's a little bit sad, because this song is not just vulnerability to a woman in the hope of her reciprocating those affections, it's really simping in the 60s. Simping is a term, a modern term, if you're unaware, of a man essentially debasing himself for the affections of a woman. And it's a problematic term in a way because it's fed by those notions of like, you're not a man if you express vulnerability. And if you allow yourself to express vulnerability, especially toward a woman, or even the remotest deference to a woman, then you're seen as being less than a man. You're a simp. Which, I don't think it should take a lot of explanation for why, that sort of immediate pejorative reaction to a man remotely deferring to a woman is problematic on its face. But when you are dispensing unrequited affection, and that person has no interest in reciprocating it, and you are literally debasing yourself for a person who doesn't care about your dignity, that's where it's problematic, and that's what I think is being expressed in the song Build Me Up, Buttercup. We can look into that a little more in depth by taking a deeper look at the verses. So I'm going to keep running through the lyrical parts myself first before I, try to splice in the studio track. So, in the event that I wind up using these instead of the studio track, bear in mind that I'm singing a cappella into a phone. No studio magic. I'm certainly not like putting my whole, diaphragm into it. So just be gentle with me. It's more about making a point than it is about singing in a magnum opus, but I hope that it's passable at the very least. So the first verse goes, right into it. He starts to reveal the disparate nature of the relationship, where he says, he's quoting her, "I'll be over at 10. You told me time and again, but you're late. I'll wait around and then." Now, clearly I'm not singing, but I'll sing it for you. "I'll be over at 10, you told me time and again, but you're late. I'll wait around and then I went to the door, I can't take any more. It's not you, you let me down again. Well, baby, try to find a little time and I'll make you happy. I'll be home, I'll be beside the phone waiting for you." And it says it all right there. It's like, so she told him she'd be over at 10, and she doesn't come. He waits around, goes to the door, maybe hears a sound. It's not her. She stood him up. And then he's saying that this is habitual. You let me down again. So this isn't like a first time where it's like, oh, whatever, no big deal. It's habitual behavior where she has taken him lightly time and again, but here he is sitting around waiting for her to show up when she's obviously not going to. But for whatever reason, he's unable to reconcile with that she is taking him lightly, and he's continuing to dispense affection to her despite that she's doing nothing to earn it from him. And it gets further pathetic as he, goes into what's essentially the pre-chorus, the latter part of that first verse, where it's like, just try to find a little time for me and I'll make you happy, I promise. And it's like, oh, that's really sad because she doesn't want your time, dude. And that's the problem with affection, is that it's not rational, of course, and if we had better control over our emotions, we'd be Vulcans instead of humans. But there really does have to be a time wherein maybe the people who actually care about this man can step in and be like, listen guys, she's not that into you, which is a book that was published about how men often treat women. So it just goes to show that the shoe is often on the other foot. This is not a one-way street when it comes to behaving callously toward the gender to which you're attracted. Men do it to women, women do it to men, and I'm sure people of other genders do it to each other. So it's it's a tale as old as time. But what needs to happen in this case is that we either need to make people who are more confident and self-reliant and autonomous and dignified and aware of their worth and value, that they're not going to dispense their affections to someone who either doesn't want them or who takes them lightly, and can recognize when they are being trifled with and then can withdraw from that relationship, because it's just not healthy to be dispensing your emotional energy into a void. And this song is all about doing precisely that. And we get back into the chorus, which we covered already, which doesn't change throughout the song. But that message is like, why do you build me up just to break me down? And it's interesting because there's really no indication in the verses of this woman ever building him up at all, which makes it seem as though that line, to be honest, I doubt that they put that much thought into it. They were just trying to write a catchy earworm, and they succeeded because it's just such a fantastic composition, such an enjoyable song to listen to, that for me to eviscerate it like this lyrically maybe isn't even that fair. But the idea of like, where is the evidence of her ever building you up? But there's plenty of evidence in these verses of her letting you down, and you let her let you down repeatedly, but yet you don't ever withdraw your affection, and that, is simping. That's toxic. That's not dignified behavior on the singer's part. So the second verse is even more problematic than the first, and it begins with, "To you I'm a toy, but I could be the boy you adore." And it's like, really? Because, if you could be, wouldn't you be? I don't think it's a matter of not doing enough after a certain point. Like, there is a point at which giving up makes sense. The whole, if at first you don't succeed, try again, might be good advice under certain circumstances, but it's certainly not good advice when it comes to unrequited affection. And so for him to be pining for this woman's affections while she's out doing whatever, and we can get into whatever she's doing as we further investigate the lyrics of this verse, because he even says, "Although you're untrue, I'm attracted to you all the more." And it's like, oh, wow. So not only are you a simp, you're also a cuckold. And that's like, wow, like where do we go to unpack the psychological entanglement? Like this is terrible. Like you need therapy to process this. Like this is not a healthy relationship. Not only is this person disregarding your feelings, but they're also sleeping around on you, and you're willing to allow both of these transgressions to go by, and you're not giving us any indication that it's consensual, like that you want to be treated like a doormat and to be cucked. And, I suppose if that's what you like, more power to you, but that's heavy subject matter for a 1960s pop song about unrequited love. Like, I don't know that they were trying to write a cuck anthem in November of 1968. If they were, I think they were probably well ahead of their time, but oof, I don't even know where to go with that. But it's like, it just gets worse. It gets worse and worse as it goes along. It's like, wow, like just rack up those indignities. So not only is she just like toying with your emotions and brushing you off and standing you up, she's also like leaving you at home holding on to your own junk while she's holding on to somebody else's. And it's like, ew. So yeah, there's that. Okay, so I'm not trying to go too hard on this poor narrator of this woeful tale of unrequited affection, but it's kind of staggering when you unpack it a little bit, and it makes me think about what I used to teach high school in the Bronx, and I would sometimes be giving lessons on analysis and how there's always a subtext or a deeper meaning to things, and my students would insist to me that when it came to certain things that it was not that deep. That was the refrain. "It's not that deep, bro." And I would always say, well, yeah, it is. It's anything can be really as deep as you want it to be if you're willing to do the excavation. And I think that refrain on their part was an indication of how superficial things have become, and how no one really is willing to do those excavations or to look at the deeper meaning of things, even things as simple as a pop confection from the late 60s. And I think, interestingly enough, like Rick Beato just had a stream where he was talking about information poor music of the modern age and how it's simple in terms of composition and it's simple in terms of meaning. And I don't listen to contemporary music, so I can't refute him, but I think it is telling. He's a producer of repute. He's a quite accomplished musician, and he's a YouTuber to beat the band. So I think we can put a little stock in Mr. Beato's musical analysis. Yet I think that, to wit, there was a lot of depth in pop music from the 60s, even though it is superficial on its face. And that I want to go into some of these a little bit, and I want to start excavating tunes from the 60s that are hugely popular, that I think promote problematic messages, and not just, from a male perspective, but also from a feminine perspective, where, tales of devotion are not beneficial to the woman's autonomy and her dignity. There are so many songs just about how having the man will make her life have all meaning, from Johnny's Girl to Judy's Turn to Cry, or It's My Party. I think his name's Johnny too. Like something about Johnny's in the 60s, where they just had a particular thrall of the ladies in their orbit, and to the point of, I guess, these women's lives were so bereft of meaning and purpose otherwise that they were meaningless without the affections of a man. And let's be real, that jibes with the societal, cultural agenda of marrying these women so that they could produce children. It was very much propaganda about, like, this is your role, to be barefoot and pregnant while your husband goes on to his high-powered career. But all that changed in the 70s when it got to the point where one income in a lot of cases wasn't enough to be able to sustain a household. And there's a lot to dig up there. You may not want to. You may be like, oh, you're trying too hard to make a connection here that really isn't there. It's not that deep, bro. But is it not really? Isn't music not a part of conveying cultural mores and the sentiments that you either want people to feel, the behaviors you want them to express? Or, alternatively, is it not an avenue of rebellion against the strictures that society is imposing upon you? I think absolutely. But in a lot of cases, pop music is not I would say in the majority of cases, pop music is not an avenue for rebellion. It's an avenue for conformity and for popular messaging, because you want to express an idea that you would like the majority of people to hold. So that's, I don't know, I think it's interesting. There's more to that second verse that I didn't express, and that is that he asks the question, why do I need you so? It's a great question. Because what that question does is, as I alluded to earlier, is that it demonstrates that this guy has some measure of introspective ability. But there is clearly some sort of barrier to him being able to go beyond merely asking the question, to understand the behavior that he exhibits, the undignified behavior, as I put it, of letting this woman run roughshod over him and sleep with whomever she chooses and play with his feelings and disrespect his time. And what if he were able to go further than merely asking the question and truly analyze what motivates his willingness to put his pride aside and allow this woman to treat him so shabbily? And I think that if he were willing to dig deeper, writing this song and asking these questions would be an essential step in arriving at a better place. Like I would think that the reprise of this theme or this idea of Build Me a Buttercup, like if there were to be a, off Buttercup or something like that, it would be, that would be some personal growth right there. It'd be like, I don't need you, and I recognize that the way you're treating me is not the way I deserve to be treated. So I'm gonna let you do your thing and don't call me anymore, or don't even bother to stop by when the rest of your Rolodex doesn't answer the phone. So, I'd be curious, like, could you make a pop song about that whole, like, I'm not going to let you use me as a doormat anymore? Now, I would argue yes, because Leslie Gore, for instance, who is the chanteuse responsible for delivering It's My Party and Judy's Turn to Cry, two toxic songs about, a woman's lack of agency and just this desperate debasement for the affections of a man who takes her lightly, also sang a song called You Don't Own Me, which I would argue is an anthem for autonomy and for feminism and for standing up for your own human dignity and not being a person's toy. So in a way, You Don't Own Me could be the answer song to Build Me Up Buttercup.